Namaskar, Nilesh here with another session episode of Shraddha and Pradnya. Today's context is related to the 17th day of the war when Arjun killed Karna. And this wasn't a specific question, but somebody requested me to specifically refer to any astronomy evidence in the context of killing of Karna. Now, there is also a geographical evidence, and those people who may feel enthusiastic about it should explore it and try to make sense out of it. Now, how do you make a sense out of anything? Well, there are many ways to do it, from Chintan, Manan, and all of that. But especially when we need the quadrangulation, that is, of the scientific method, explanation, prediction, testing, or that's a triangulation, forgive me, or a quadrangulation as explained by Krishna to Uddhav in Bhagavad Puran, which is what? Shruti, and you can add Smriti to it also, because let me just do the first narration from Bhagavad Puran. Shruti pratyaksham aitiyam anumanam chatushtayam pramaneshu anuvasthanad vikalpat savirajyate. So Shruti pratyaksha aitiyam anumana. So Shruti pratyaksha aitiya anuman. And if you go to Taittiriya Aranyak, you will get exactly same shlok, only Shruti is replaced with Smriti. One of the key factor I want to mention there is that therefore our ancient sages, they did understand the distinction between Shruti and Smriti, but at the same time, they had the Viveka Buddhi to consider them as similar or same in a specific context. So in terms of understanding the knowledge of the things that can be easily empirically tested or can be experienced by majority of the people, they did not make a distinction between Shruti and Smriti. In any case, that's not the main subject. The person who requested me to summarize astronomy evidence related to killing of Karna-Vadha by Arjun. So this is part 19 in Shraddha and Pradnya series. So Karna-Vadha and astronomy evidence. Karna was killed on the 17th day of the Mahabharata war, just the second last day, you can say. And the day happens to be 1st November 5561 BCE. So not far from today, coming Tuesday would be 1st November 5561 BCE. And that would be 7583rd anniversary of Karna-Vadha. Okay, someone who belonged to the same family as Pandavas, one of the Pandavas' brother. But the way he has to face some circumstances, in fact, he had a good pair of adoptive parents. However, at some point when he came in touch with a bad company of Kaurava brothers, and then of course their mama Shakuni and so on, what a transformation that took place in a Karna. Now we have very limited details of his early life, so there is not much we can say about it. On the other hand, Mahabharata text is explicit. The personality of Karna that we see in the pages of Mahabharata text of Vyasadeva is consistent, which is very different than many of the so-called modern writers. And many of them have written on a Karna, and of course not all, fortunately, but a good number of them have projected Karna in a fashion which is practically 180-degree opposite to the way Karna is described in the Mahabharata. Now, what can cause this? Of course, certain agenda, but let us not psychoanalyze them. Then, so if you remove the aspect of agenda, then we can say that it has to do with the tamasi buddhi. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, adharmam dharmam itya manyate tamasavruta sarvarthan viparitamsha buddhisa partha tamasi. A tamasi buddhi is that buddhi which sees dharma as a adharma, adharma as a dharma, and when looking at a factual something, factual evidence, a objective reality, okay, turns it upside down in its comprehension to that individual, okay. Sarvarthan viparitamsha, it will twist everything, viparit, opposite, and in that sense, I'm using the term 180-degree opposite. It will do that. And that's what Karna did. Karna couldn't see the reality as one ought to. All right, a very sad event in that sense. So that happened on the 17th day of the war. That was on the 1st November 5561 BC. So if you add 2022 years to that 5561 BC, you get that 7583 years ago, how long Mahabharata war took place. And of course, that number anniversary of Karna's death. Now, pictorially, visually, if you like to imagine this, so pictures do help. Think of, imagine the timing is that of the sunset, and Krishna asks Arjun to hit Karna with the arrow. Okay, Karna's chariot, if you see that individual sitting there, the charioteer, that's a Shalya, who was going to become the Senapati the next day. After Karna died, Shalya was chosen as a Senapati, but here for Karna, he was acting as a charioteer. So timing is of the sunset on the 17th day of the war, 1st November 5561 BCE, more than 7,500 years ago, or to be precise, 7583 years ago. Okay, let's look at the astronomy evidence. So first, the Karna-Vadha and the Mercury evidence. Again, remember, we are going to 17th day of the war, and that's 14th, forgive me, that's 1st November 5561 BC, 17th day of the war. The timing is that of just after the sunset, immediately after the sunset. In another episode, I introduce you, those of you who are not aware, of course, those of you who are aware, hey, great, you already know this, how to use this. But I introduce you the critical edition and especially the importance of the footnotes. So here we have part of this evidence, the Mercury evidence in the context of Karna-Vadha. So this comes on the 17th day of the war. Critical edition, the reference is chapter Adhyay 68, verse 47, or Adhyay 68, Shlok 47. Hatesma karane sarito na stravanti jagam chastu kalusho divakaraha grahascha tiryag jwalitarka varno yamasya putro abhyudaya rajan. In some other episodes, I have referred to some other Mahabharata dating researchers. Even when alternate editions, alternate readings exist, they will emphasize the Yamasya Putro Abhyudaya Rajan, and therefore they will say, hey, I don't know who that Yamasya Putro is, so therefore not much can be done, and just will simply slide away the evidence. The reason they do that is because they cannot match this description for the date, for the year they claim, for the year of Mahabharata war. Okay, this is unacceptable. This is a fraud in a broad daylight. This is unscientific. This is illogical. It is perfectly okay to take a reference and say, hey, if this is indeed Somasya Putro and therefore Mercury, guess what? For my date, Whatever their claimed year is and the specific day, it does not match. Put it aside. That by itself is not going to make or break a case. There are 300 plus astronomy pieces of evidence, okay? And we know the different reasons why sometimes something may or may not match because of the part away, because of interpolations and so on. Now, let's look at the Gita Press edition. There you can see, now you can see the Patha Veda. Hate karne sarito na prasanno, rijagam chastam savita divakarah, grahascha tiryag jwalanarka varna, somasya putro abhyudaya tiryak. Now, each of these words, that is the beauty of a Sanskrit, and therefore sometimes a challenge. They have multiple meanings, and we have to pick the right meaning in the context. And sometimes even the context is understood from the pratyaksha. Therefore, when I refer to Krishna's quadrangulation, okay, Shruti, Pratyaksham, Aitiyam, Anumanam. So sometimes to make sense of the Shruti, you have to see what the Pratyaksha is. And based on that, you can do a Anuman about certain thing, okay, about a Aitihasik statement such as this. Okay, so first line, the first version we can say from critical edition, Yamasya Putro, we wouldn't able to make sense of it. If someone can, hey, great, go ahead and make sense of it. But the second one, Somasya Putro Abhyudaya Tiryak, makes very easy sense. Soma Putra is a Mercury. Abhyudaya Tiryak, okay, Abhyudaya is like rising, coming up, progress, you know, progression, something like this. And Tiryak can be seen, translated in many ways, like a slanted, across, in an abnormal, non-normal way, you know, not a normal thing, then we won't call it Tiryak. Somebody's walking straight, you just say he's walking. Somebody's walking at an angle, you say he's walking Tiryak, okay? Something not ordinary, something out of the ordinary might be represented by the word Tiryak, okay? All right, now look at some variations, by the way. So this Abhyudaya, there you can also see a variation. For example, Abhyudhyaya doesn't change much meaning. Abhyudhi Astu, Abhyudit Astu, Astu in the sense of, if you take Asta in the sense of, or Abhyudit Astu is like he is rising, okay? Astu, like as a to be verb, that way one can take it. Another one, for example, is Astu, at the time of the sunset or at the time of the setting. Like when the Mercury is setting, guess what? He is rising up in the sky. It can be taken in that fashion. Tiryak, as I said, could be taken as a across, slanted, non-normal, abnormal. Abnormal, non-normal to what? Possibly how other planets behave, or otherwise how this planet may behave. And there could be so many meanings of it. The point is, until, I mean, it's not always the case, but until sometime when there is so much variation, so much samshaya, so much doubt about this, if we are lucky to find the pratyaksha for that day, we may able to understand these descriptions better. Okay, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you a demonstration of. Okay, so we are going to jump to the first day of the Mahabharata war. Now, it's very important to understand so that we don't get into the circular reasoning. Okay, the identification or the determination of the year of the Mahabharata war as 5561 BC by me was not based on this Mercury evidence. The identification of the first day of the Mahabharata war as equal to October 16 was not based on this Mercury evidence. So I want you to understand the independent testing of this Mercury evidence in this context. So October 16 is first day, 5561 BC is the year of Mahabharata war, based on other evidence, nothing to do with Mercury. Okay, that's how we have arrived at this. Now, since the first day is October 16, from that day, if you start counting, the 1st November is going to be the 17th day of the war, 1st November 5561 BC. And now we are going to test what this Abhyudaya Tiryak, abnormal rising, okay, progression of Mercury is, that is described on the 17th day of the war. Now, keep in mind, any day, if you are making an astronomy observation, any given day, let's say at the time of sunset, and you see the Mercury in the sky after sunset, like what is shown here. This horizontal line is the horizon. Sun has just gone below, and I deliberately modeled it so that it just gone below, and I'm showing the scenario. This is the scenario, how this is how I am going to show you the scenario through the 18 days of the Mahabharata war. Then only you start appreciating somasya putro abhyudaya tiryak. Okay, so every time I will make sure for every day the sun position matches just below the horizon. So you have that as a reference against which what you're going to observe. Naturally, there is another reference thing that you have, the Jupiter. So just at the sunset, two prominent planets that could be seen on the western horizon are Mercury and Jupiter. That is for October 16, 5561 BCE. And you're going to find something very interesting and surprising. I'll hold the surprise for you for just a few more minutes. So this is the situation on the first day of the war. Okay, and remember, after Karna was killed by Arjun on the 17th day of the war, Vyasadeva is describing about Mercury as Somasya Putro Abhyudaya Tiryak. Mercury was rising, okay, Abhyudaya, in a Tiryak fashion, whatever that meant, okay? Or Abhyudayastu, you can say that just before setting, Mercury was rising. You can take it like that. Or you can also take this as at the time of the Asta, so Mercury was rising. You can take it in many different ways. Interestingly or fortunately, none of this changes. In fact, all of these variations add to the richness of the description. And actually what Mercury did on the 17th day of the war, after sunset, you're going to see this. My point is, on any given day, such as say the 17th day of the war, all you're going to see after sunset is one particular position of Mercury. Mercury is not going to move on that day. Within that time, you're just going to see stationary Mercury. So why is Vasudev saying Somasya Putro Abhyudaya Tirya? It's Mercury is rising in an abnormal fashion, non-normal fashion, slanted, angular, whatever you want to call it, in an angular fashion. In order to understand that description, you have to watch the Mercury, which Vasudev is doing, not only through 18 days, Vasudev is watching the sky entire time, plus minus 1 year of the Mahabharata war. That's what he's telling Dhritarashtra. Of course, when he's telling Dhritarashtra, he's watching the sky for 1+ years before, leading to the day of Mahabharata war. And of course, Vasudev continued to watch the sky at sunrise, sunset, during the day, during the night, throughout, after the Mahabharata war. Okay, so let's see what happens. I may do it a few times just to fast forward kind of thing, so that you get a sense of what Mercury is doing. Remember, I'm always keeping the sunset position the same. Sunset position is going to move by 1 degree every day, and you'll notice that. So for example, it may not be a bad idea to notice the position of Jupiter, which is not going to move much in 18 days. Also note down the point of fall equinox, that 180 degree. So that might help you to understand what is happening to the relative position of Mercury with respect to that fall equinox point, Jupiter, and the sun. Let's do that. This is the first day. The second day, I will leave it to you to understand what happened to Mercury. And third, and fourth, and fifth, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is the day Bhishma fell down. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. What happened during those days? Okay, of course, the sun is going to move. In fact, sun has gone also beyond that fall equinox. Every day, sun is going to move by 1 degree or so. But notice what happened to Mercury. Okay, it is, so every day, somebody facing the western horizon at the sunset time, and if he or she would have observed the position of Mercury for the 18 days of the war, they would have seen every day Mercury is rising up in the sky. rising up in the sky with respect to the position of the sun. Okay, and with respect to the position of the Jupiter, it bypassed Jupiter, okay, and went further west direction, further west, and therefore up in the sky at the time of the sunset. I'm going to go back so you can see how it is coming back here. I'm going to go back to the first day of the war, and I'll do now smoothly without saying anything until the 18 days of the war. I'll just count the days. Day number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That is the Abhyudaya, rising of Mercury, as described by Vasudev on the 17th day of the war. Now, some people will say, what's the big deal about it? Let's get to the 17th day of the war. The big deal is, this should fascinate you. The evidence is so simple, no confusion, but no other Mahabharata researcher other than 5561 BCE will able to show the presence of Mercury sufficiently away from the sun and to the east of the sun. Okay, and therefore on the western horizon after sunset, you will able to see it. Okay. No other Mahabharata researcher will able to show this, and therefore no other Mahabharata researchers discusses this evidence. In fact, if you ask any other Mahabharata researchers this reference to Somasya Putro Abhyudaya Tirya, expect digression, expect all kinds of name calling, expect in some fashion change of goalpost. This is our first evidence. Okay, on the same day, there is another evidence. And therefore, I said this would be a surprise. Karna-Vadha and Jupiter evidence. In fact, two distinct pieces of evidence, okay, on the day of Karna-Vadha, that is 17th day of the war, are these two. First, in the context of Mercury, Somasya Putro Abhyudaya Tirya, and the second one is in the context of Brahaspati, Jupiter. Brahaspati Rohini Samprapidya Babhuva Chandrarka Samana Varna. And you can see some variations again, for example, like some Saparivarya Rohini, Samo Vishampate, and even for a Brahaspati, it's important to notice, okay, especially I'm saying this as a benefit of doubt to other Mahabharata researchers. Remember, no other Mahabharata researcher other than the claim of 5561 BC will able to show what Brahaspati is being described here, what he's doing. Brahaspati is giving a pida to Rohini exactly the same way Chandra and Surya, Chandra Arka, were giving pida to Rohini on the first day of the war. In exactly the same fashion, Saturn was giving pida to Rohini. No other Mahabharata researchers other than 5561 BC will able to show this to you. So as a benefit of doubt to them, I'm saying, for example, if they want to play around with this, and it will be a lot of fun, Brahaspati, instead of Brahaspati, in some manuscripts, you actually see Graha Shani instead of Brahaspati. Now, so if they want to take, hey, you know what, it wasn't actually Brahaspati, it was actually Graha Shani. Yes, they could be right, because at least in some manuscripts, we see it. That doesn't take away a possibility for someone like me to take it as a Brahaspati, which Gita Press is saying it, Critical Edition is saying it, but it's not so much about how many people are saying it. The fact that the manuscript, the multiple manuscript exists, and at least some manuscripts refers to Graha Shani instead of Brahaspati. If somebody wants to take this as Graha Shani and not Brahaspati, I would be delighted. Okay, and you should be delighted. And let's be curious and see if anyone takes this bet. I can assure you nobody is going to, but it will be really nice if somebody takes it. All right, so how do we understand this? Again, do watch my videos at Sattology. At some point in this series, I will address these issues also. But the way Rohini is being given pida by Saturn by Sun and Moon together on the first day of the war, and by Brihaspati, Jupiter, on the 17th day of the war. These all three can be shown doing it exactly in a consistent fashion only for 5561 BCE. But let's see what it is. I'm just going to go briefly through this because otherwise this will be another double episode. I don't want to do that. So let's look at the 17th day of the war, the 1st November. And remember, this is what we saw. We saw a expanded picture of, forgive me, we saw the expanded picture of this right here, sun at the horizon, like just below the horizon. So sun has set. Then here is the Jupiter and here is the Mercury. That was the scenario on the 17th day of the war, right? Okay. Now, what the verse is saying is Brihaspati Rohini Samprapidya Babhuva Chandrarka Samana Varna. That Jupiter was afflicting or giving a pida to Rohini, which was on the eastern horizon. Okay, it has just come up on the eastern horizon, and Jupiter is ready to go below the horizon on the western side, western horizon. It is giving pida by being in the opposition in the sky. Okay, at the opposite ends of the sky. Now keep these descriptions and then watch Saptology episode. I think it says Sun, Moon, Pida. Okay. And just notice what you see. The way you will see Saturn giving Pida to Rohini is also by being in the opposite ends of the sky. And the way Sun and Moon are giving Pida to Rohini is also by being at the opposite ends of the sky. In fact, if you go back 17 days, what's going to happen? The Sun will go further down, okay? And but that day, first day, it was day of Amavasya, and Sun was near with Moon. And from there, at the time of setting, they were giving Pida to Rohini. And see, that beautiful description is captured here. Brihaspati Rohini Samprapidya Babhuva Chandrarka Samana Varna. Otherwise, Chandrarka Samana Varna has no meaning. The reference of this context is with that other reference, which says Rohini Pidayatteva Ubhaucha Shashi Bhaskaro. That is the other reference. So Shashi and Bhaskar, okay, Sun and Moon were giving Pida to Rohini on the first day of the war. The position of Sun is fixed. The position of Rohini is fixed. Okay, and Moon was near the Sun. They were in the opposite portions of the sky. That's how Brihaspati is also in the opposite portions of the sky. And that's how we can show, and I have already shown it 10 times, that Saturn was also at the opposite end of the sky with respect to Rohini in year 5561 BC. So that's a astronomy evidence in the context of Karna killing on the 17th day of the war. And I think that's all I have for today. Okay, please, especially the individual who asked me, who requested me to do it, please let me know what you think of this. And of course, for others, give me your comments. You can post your questions. Be very crisp and clean and clear. And also, you cannot give me something like, hey, why don't you present a research about something? No, ask a very pertinent, very crisp, very straightforward question, which can be handled in like 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maximum 40 minutes. Okay, that's a requirement. So if you ask a question and I choose not to answer, one of these are possibly the reasons. First thing, you are asking, essentially asking me to boil the ocean. No, that is not possible. That would take me another 30 years. And I don't know if you have additional 30 years left. But this should encourage number of you, all of us, irrespective of the age, but especially the young generations, to take some tough problems, okay, and try to solve them because they have time to their advantage. Of course, keep in mind, time is not the only ingredient required. You also need a Vijnana Buddhi. You also need a knowledge of a Nyaya Darshana. You also need a tenacity, perseverance, and willingness, and knowing well that you may spend 10 years on something and still you may not succeed. In fact, you may never succeed. And therefore, just don't work on a one problem. All right, let me know. Thank you. That's all I have for this one. See you soon in another session of Shraddha and प्रज्ञा. नमस्कार.